Let's move to this story now, and it focuses around Cornubia in Durban. A criminal case is being opened in connection with the chemical spill in that area. Environment Minister Barbara Creecy says that United Phosphorus Limited did not have the environmental authorisation to operate its chemical factory near Durban. This is according to a report released by the department. Now, the factory, which stores various types of chemicals, was set alight during the July unrest, and water used by firefighters to douse the flames apparently caused this chemical spill, resulting in beach closures and rivers and lagoons also impacted. I'm joined now by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment's Chief Director of Enforcement, Frances Craigie. Good evening, Ms. Craigie, and thank you very much for your time. Just talk to me about what action the department is taking now.
Thanks very much, Sally, and good evening. There's a number of actions that are underway at the moment. As you said, unfortunately, what has happened at that facility is it resulted in a significant amount of water moving into the environment. So we had three priorities that we needed to focus on. The first was to obviously deal with the emergency incident immediately. The second was to really look at what was happening in the environment to ensure that we stopped the pollution from moving, to work together with UPL and their specialists to ensure that the environment was remediated. And remembering that the impacts were not only on air pollution because of the fire incident, but also on the freshwater system, the estuary there at Umhlanga, as well as into the marine environment. So that second priority has taken up a lot of time. And then, of course, the third priority, which you mentioned just now, was to do an investigation into that regulatory regime in which that warehouse was operating at the time. And so that is the preliminary investigation report that we've recently issued, which was around what were they doing at the time? Did they have the permits in place? That regulatory environment in which they needed to operate, were they lawful or not?
And what are you finding there?
So, as you said, it is a preliminary investigation, and unfortunately, based on the information that we had at hand in both July and August, we did find that they were not operating lawfully in that warehouse. The environmental authorization that they required, they did not have in place, and in addition to that, they had not undertaken certain risk assessments that would be required in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So given the volume of chemicals that were in that warehouse and the types of chemicals, we believe that they were classified as a major hazard installation, and they needed to undertake certain assessments and get certain other scheduled trade activities permits from the local authority, which they were not in possession of.
So just to clarify, who exactly then gives the environmental authorization?
So we have a specific piece of legislation called the National Environmental Management Act, and there's various competent authorities. And what that act says that if you are undertaking listed activities and the storage of a certain amount of dangerous goods are listed activities, then it is the competent authority that must issue that environmental authorization. And in this particular case, it would be the KZN Department of Environmental Affairs. And normally, before we issue an environmental authorization, the party would need to undertake what we call an environmental impact assessment. And so, they would bring various specialists in, and the KZN department would then make a decision based on all the information provided, whether to issue that authorization and whether to issue it in that location or in another location.
So the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Environmental Affairs sounds to me like they dropped the ball.
I wouldn't say that, Sally, no, because remember the obligation is actually on a party that is going to undertake a listed activity to, do that impact assessment, to make application to the department, and then to do various studies and put certain information before the department that would enable the department to say, yes, I'm going to grant you an environmental authorization, or I'm not going to grant you an environmental authorization. Remember, the storage at that particular warehouse has only been happening for 3 months before the fire actually broke out. So, they hadn't been in place for a long time period. And in fact, the KZN department was not aware that they were even storing those chemicals at that site at the time.
It is worrying, though, because it suggests, you say, the obligation is on the person who wants to store the chemicals. That suggests that you trust them to be honest enough to come and make those applications, which they clearly didn't. Otherwise, you'd say, yes, we've got all the papers, and these are the chemicals that were stored. There sounds to me like something very, very wrong with the way the regulation is set up. Surely that needs to be looked at.
Well, look, there's many listed activities that are in the National Environmental Management Act, and in fact, whether you're doing storage of dangerous goods, whether you're developing a housing development, whether you're doing a ferroalloy steel industry, there's various listed activities that we have identified that could potentially cause serious harm to the environment. And if you are operating in a very regulated environment like that, the onus is on those people that are doing those types of things, to come forward. And obviously, where they don't come forward, there are consequences. And so there are very serious consequences for not having obtained that environmental authorization. And as you said at the beginning, there is now a criminal investigation underway. The consequences of that, and that if they are found guilty in court and the prosecutors decide to prosecute, there's very hefty fines in terms of the different...
But here's the question I have. I understand that there are consequences if you're caught out. And it sounds to me like this company has indeed been caught out. But let's look at the consequences to the environment. I heard Barbara Creecy on radio earlier today saying that this is going to take years. So let's look at a lack of proactivity on the Department of the KwaZulu-Natal Department, just hoping blindly that people will come and report what they're planning to do, against the very real consequences on the environment. Just sketch that out for us. How badly has the environment been damaged? What is the threat to humans and to wildlife? And how long, if ever, will it take to fully be restored?
Mm-hmm. So as you correctly said, it has had a significant impact, due to the fact that there was a lot of volume of chemicals being stored in that warehouse, and due to the fact that a lot of water was obviously used to put out that fire. While the fire was burning, there was a health impact. So, we had the Umhlanga residents obviously being affected, depending on the wind direction, by the actual smoke and the pollution plume in the environment. But obviously, once that fire was put out, and it was put out with water, unfortunately, you then had volumes of water moving into the environment downstream of where the facility is. And so as a result of that, into the freshwater system, unfortunately, we had a lot of fish and vegetation that has died off as a result of that. And as it moved through the freshwater system, it obviously moved into the estuary as well. And so it killed off all the life in that estuary, the fish, crustaceans, etc. And then because the estuary was open to the sea, you also had movement of those pollutants into the ocean. Many of you would know, living in that area, that the beaches were closed and they remain closed at the moment. We're waiting for a peer review of the toxicologists' reports in order to really say, look, we feel safe enough to give notification that those beaches can be opened. But we are talking a number of years, Sally. We are going to have a problem there, as it rains, more pollutants into the environment. And so we are trying to ensure that the cleanup happens as quickly as possible. But it is going to be a number of years until, this environment is brought back to what it should be.
Does it make you angry?
Of course, extremely angry. I mean, I think that, one doesn't, realize that these kind of things can happen to the extent that they have happened in this particular case. And I think, the minister has also said that this is one of the largest kind of spills that we've had into the environment and the biggest impacts in a number of years. So I think as a department, we really will be dealing with this for the next couple of years to see how we can assist the public and how we can ensure that those who are accountable for what has happened are brought to book if necessary.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. Francis Craigie, Director of Enforcement at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. Such dismaying news.